ready to go. So thank you all for being here. Today I have the multi-talented, incredible, interdisciplinary artist and designer, Arzu Ozkal. Thank you so much for being here today. I know you have a lot going on in Design Week, a lot of your own projects. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm so happy to be here. It's really exciting to, be here meeting with you, Yasmine, and questioning together what the heck is contemporary art and design.
Yes.
I'm a little tired, I have to say. I have two projects, part of the San Diego Design Week, and they're all participatory and collaboratory projects. So it's in different spaces. So I have to between my day job, I'm a professor at San Diego State. So I have to drive around and check on the projects, how things are going. So I'm really exhausted.
I can imagine.
But it's great. I'm really proud of the community, the design community, everybody, all my colleagues putting the Design Week together, because I think it's this amazing celebration of all this creative and cultural activity happening in San Diego. Yeah. It's really great event to be a part of. I'm honored and happy.
Well, we're honored to have you here. Design Week, this is its second year?
This is the second year.
And you were the president last year, is that correct?
No. Oh. I'm one of the advisors.
Oh, okay. But you have you're in a leadership position making it all happen.
I have no leadership position.
Gotcha.
I'm so glad I don't. No, I think there's the team. I don't have the full list, but I understand it's the Minge Museum, Patricia Quay, one of the initiators, Stacy Kelly from Set and Drift, Susan Merritt, an emeritus faculty from San Diego State, May Lynn, I believe. So there's a community of people. I just support because I love their cause, and I do some advising and all that. And I, propose projects. Yeah, well, I don't have any leadership position on that.
Well, I really appreciate you being here. And this collaboration with Design Week and ICA, I think is really exciting because if some of you joining don't already know, Lux Art Institute is changing, and come tomorrow, we will be known as ICA San Diego. Two places to check out the artists, the programs, the collaborations to come, both up in the north, where Lux Art Institute currently is, and in Balboa Park, formerly the site of SDAI. It's really exciting. Definitely worth checking out. Going to check out the events happening with Design Week is going to be really awesome. And as the months go on, there'll be some artists in there as well. A little bit more on that later at the end of tonight's event, so stick around. But let's jump into it. Arzu, what do you think contemporary art is?
That is a great question, Yasmine. When you guys first approached me about, being a part of this class, and with the question, what the heck is contemporary art? I was like, do we really need to answer this question? And then I remembered my own experience at college, as a college student, probably 19 or 20 years old. I went to school in Turkey, studying graphic design, at an institution that was really very strict what graphic design was, right? Swiss school, form follows function. You have to judge every design element, what the meaning it adds to the design, the functionality. So it was very designers were the most important people in the world and artists were not. So I, went to a school that treated design artists a little like secondary citizens. One day we had, one day, and I completely bought into that system. I was like, oh, we are designers and they're losers, the artists. We had a visiting artist, Van Patterson, one of the original members of Fluxus, visited my university, and I had no idea who this person was at the time. Artist, I didn't give him much attention, because he wasn't going to contribute anything to my education or my field, what I wanted to be. I was working in the library trying to finish a project, and a friend of mine came, and I said, like, you have to come to this, Arzu. Like, you can't miss this. This is a one-of-a-lifetime opportunity. An actual real performance was a Fluxus artist. I'm like, what is Fluxus? He's like, you have to come. So I'm like, okay, I packed up my bag and everything. So I went, and it blew my mind. Like, it was the first time, because my understanding of art was so limited, right? I had no idea what artists, it was just like all filtered through my professors who taught me that, art is like people in their studios waiting for divine inspiration and not really engage with the world, or okay, Cezanne and, masters and all that. My scope was so limited. Mm-hmm. So when I watched this performance that was participatory, so what Van Patterson did was like he gave everybody a rose, a red rose, and he came into the hall, this big lecture hall, with a scissors. So he cut each rose and put it in a blender, and there was a metronome, typical Fluxus performance metronome, clicking in the back. He put things in a blender, a little bit water. He blended the whole thing. It's this beautiful, like, noise, and then he drank the whole thing and left the classroom. And I was like, somebody just slapped me in the face, like, what the heck was that? I've never experienced anything like that in my life. Like, it's not in the gallery, it's not on a wall. It just speaks to all our senses, like smells and drinking, disgust. It was just amazing. After that, everything in my life changed. Like, the way that I approached the design changed, the way that my questioning, understanding of art, like, grew and exploded. So I don't know the answer to the question, but I think everybody has this experience of art and design that explains them what that may be.
I really love that you shared this story, because I can relate to, like, that discovery of, like, oh my gosh, like, this is contemporary art and design, and it's hard to even describe it. And I like how you're like, it's a slap in the face. Yes. Yeah. I had a very similar experience. Art was this divine, like, mental, like, ability that came from hearing and seeing the muses. And I too had a very limited scope. And it wasn't until I took a sound art class one summer and we really got into Fluxus art that I was like, art can be so much more than what I know it to be. It can be nothing. And even that nothing is something. And I really like what you said about, should we even answer the question, or is it even definable? Because I think there's a truth to that. I learned so much from every guest I have on this class, because everyone has their own unique answer. One consistency is it's impossible to design, or at least or to describe, or at least feels impossible to describe. It's something that you feel, which I have to agree with.
It is very personal. It really, and I'm sure everybody here in the audience went to a gallery and museum and felt that intensity in front of something, right? And I think that is what it is. Mm-hmm. So it is difficult to, like, verbalize in a dictionary meaning. It's just that intense emotion.
Yeah, it's just something that you know when you know it.
Right. And sometimes you don't, and you go home and you're like, oh, that was art.
Yeah. Yeah. So another thing I wanted to ask is that I asked the question so much, what is contemporary art? Design is something that's also very fundamental to the arts, and yet it's sort of, it occupies almost like a different space, although they overlap. Because in my art education, I went to Heron School of Art and Design, and in the first year, everyone's together learning their foundations. And then after the first year, you split up. And the visual communications majors were just in this cave. And one of my very good friends was doing visual communications. And it's like we were in different worlds, even though we were in the same school, we were interacting with the same people. It was like at some point there was this language that she was developing that I was not. So I want to ask, sort of in the same way I asked the first question, what is design and what is contemporary design?
Right. Well, I think design, there are two things in design: the field of design and the profession of design, right? And I think we are creating that really rigid border between the creatives and the designers, or the artists and the designers, because academia focuses so much on the profession, meaning, you follow the rules, you follow what is out there already, and, try to imitate some of that, use decent typography, make it legible, readable, right? That's the profession. Yeah. When we talk about the field, though, like, it's really wide, right? Because there we're talking about connections, blurring the boundaries between art and design. So to answer your question first, when I think of design is a profession of service. Like we service other people, helping, maybe coming up with solutions to their, it could be a visual problem, or it could be a product problem, it could be a promotion problem, right? It's a service profession. But it's the profession part is, to me, a little narrow. But when we think about the field, again, it's really not easy to explain in just a sentence, like what design is, because what it could be. One of my favorite quotes from Victor Papanek, who is a design theorist, the 50s, explains design as just imposing meaningful order to anything, which is, it could be like pulling an impacted tooth, to like writing a concerto, to like organizing your desktop drawer, right? It's just a way of thinking to approach anything in life, which is, just to analyze what your elements are, and then coming up with a meaningful order to, address those elements, which could be sound or image or visual, or the mess that you have in your room.
So design is just part of life.
It is part of life. Yeah, it is, to me, right.
I think by that definition, like, it's hard to disassociate from just how you go about living and how people operate, which I think is really interesting, because when we talk about design and people and design as spaces and organizations, there's so much of that investigation, I think, in your work that I was seeing, which, when it comes to people, do you think design is difficult?
Designing for people, designing with people, what do you mean?
Anything to do with people and design.
It is very difficult. It's absolutely difficult. I think being a human being within a community is really difficult. Like, it's a constant negotiation of needs and wants and egos, and yeah.
Yeah, total agreement. Before I move on, anyone in the audience, anyone have a comment about contemporary art and design, a question you'd like to ask? All right, then. Well, I'm going to go ahead and start the slideshow. Thank you for your insight with the ever popular question, what the heck is contemporary art and design? All right, now I'm going to do that awkward thing where I say I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so we are here in Design Week. The theme that we're looking at today is art and design, the intersection and disparities. We've touched on that a little bit. And as both Arzu and I were sort of going back and forth earlier, there is art and design for me are like the double helix of creativity, beauty, of just yeah, I think like that's the best way I can put it. They're together, and I think they're sort of, there's an inseparable aspect of it. And yet when they're taught and when you're going through the field, or not the field, but the profession and learning the profession, they are sort of split. And yet there's those links that put them together. And as a contemporary artist who definitely doesn't think about themselves as designing something, Arzu, looking at your work made me really think about my own practice. And listening to you talk a little bit more about how, you know, design is problem solving. It's confronting something and creative thinking. And to me, like, that is art so much as well. So there's so many intersections. You know, I feel like when they're taught, they're very separated. So I'm really interested in looking at that hybridity and that true hybridity, and when they're both acknowledged. There you are. Special welcome. Thank you so much for being here. Couldn't do it without you.
I'm so happy.
So one of the first things that I wanted to talk about that was just really striking in your work was your And Everything Else series from Home Affairs. Now, Home Affairs is an ongoing project, correct?
It is a collective, yeah, that I co-founded, yeah.
Okay. Do you want to talk a little bit about the collective before we get into these specific works?
Sure. So this is a collective, like I do, all my projects are collaborative. So I don't like working by myself. And it may be because I'm coming from the design background that I always worked as a part of a team. Mm-hmm. You know, when you're working in a graphic design agency, you're the copywriter, copy editor, the client, like there's always the team conversation and discussion. So I really love that. I think that's really helped me enjoy what I do, to have that creative conversation. So I co-founded this collective. It's used to be two women. One is based in Ohio, Nanette Yanuzzi, really good friend and colleague of mine that we worked together at some point when I taught at Ohio. And another colleague, Claudia Patterson, she is now in Wichita. So we were like, let's think of projects, come up with ideas, you know, just keep the creative dialogue going. We didn't really have an idea in the beginning. We published a book together before the series, so we just enjoyed working together, but it wasn't a formalized collective. Yeah. In 2012, I had my first child, my son, Milo, and that's also the time that I moved to San Diego for this job at San Diego State. So it was quite a difficult time for me, you know, starting this tenure track position at San Diego State University, being pregnant and hearing all these advice from other faculty members, like, oh, don't have a baby in your first year or until you get tenured. It's really difficult. New York Times had the article at the time, like, can women have it all? It's either your career or you can choose motherhood. So all these ideas were like really depressing me. So I reached out to my colleague, Nanette, who is a little older than me. Her children were already in high school at the time. And I asked, like, hey, how did you do it? Like, I know you're such a successful artist, you know, you sustain your art career and you have two really successful children. Obviously, you did not neglected them. Her response started the whole thing, because she said, like, oh my God, I can't believe people are still discussing about this. Like, how do your colleagues approach your pregnancy as an obstacle, but not provide you with ways to support you in this? So I was like, yeah, what the heck? Let's just, you know, come out with a project. Then we started like documenting people. We reached out to women who are also artists and caregivers. We just started making these poster series, you know, just letting them reflect on their experience. We just wanted to show people that this is doable. It's kind of sad that we're still discussing or being forced to choose one or the other. I think the world needs to accommodate us as caregivers, wanting to be mothers and fathers and also have a career and, you know, also have ambitions in life. Like, that doesn't mean that I'm ready to give up everything to, you know. So yeah, this is a series of screen print photography that we take the photo, like we arrange sessions with the mothers with their children. The one on the right is myself with my firstborn. The other one is an artist based in Atlanta, Robin Bracington, with her son. So yeah, it's just a series to document people's struggles and complaints, and also showcase that these people exist. You know, there are mothers and fathers, and they're also trying to keep a studio practice.
Yeah, this was so striking to me, because I think, like, it goes without saying, there is absolutely stigma against women, like, being working professionals and also trying to raise a family. And so many, I think, like, the art world and all the things that it sort of interacts with is credited with being really progressive, but looking at your prints really highlighted the disparities in that. So many art institutions and foundational aspects of art, such as galleries, museums, schools, still do not provide the resources and accommodations for mothers, for families. I think that's part of the story of being a creative professional, is that, well, if you're a creative professional, you don't have time for a family. At least that's the narrative that I definitely got the vibes from, and that I still see. And when I was in grad school, you know, someone in a cohort a few years earlier than, or later than my year, was going through the throes of having children. My good friend had both of his children during our time at school, and another one of my friends had a daughter, and it's just, the difference between them was striking, because they were both men, and, you know, they didn't bring their kids around too much. But then the other grad student, it was her, and her daughter became integral to not just the space, but then also it seemed like her practice. And you see how there's still not room being made for that. And I think that this really brings attention to that, in that sense. And just, it shows the power of just looking at an image activates that, like, oh yeah, why isn't there more kids or, you know, accommodations for mothers in these spaces?
No, it is. It's such a deep and, you know, historical issue. I got kicked out of an exhibition just because I was pregnant, and the curator thought I was not going to be able to deliver the piece on time because it was very close to my due date.
Mhm.
And yeah, I'm full of stories that are really depressing.
Well, I think that those are really important because I think it comes back to pointing at design, because you have these incredible prints here, that I think are very like straightforward and didactic in asking that question or pointing something out. But then you're also, I think, bringing up not just a design element in terms of imagery, but like a societal design, like how our institutions run, and the design of that institution that then limits, and intentionally excludes certain people because of how it's run. And I think like that for me was really eye-opening because, when I think of design, I'm always thinking about graphics. I'm not, I wasn't always thinking about like all the things that are not visual, but then also are very visual, the things that are very real and affect your life. I think it goes back to what you were saying in the beginning, that quote, that you brought up. And this was just very moving, and is really making me think about, the different institutions that I'm going to interact with as a woman. If I decide to have children, how am I supposed to think about these things in my career? I think you raise a really important point.
Thank you. Like it is definitely. I think the two sides to this whole poster series or social campaign, whatever you call it. It is to like bring the issue. Like I want museums to also think like when they see this and like, what do we do? Right. I think it's a good question for ICA too. Like all our institutions, all design institutes, what do we do to support people with children? And it doesn't have to be mothers or caregivers, right? Like what do we do? Because there are so many problems. Like all the openings are at the same time where the kids go to sleep. So you either drag your sleepy child to a gallery and make a scene, or you don't go and don't support your friends. You lose contact with the community. You can't mingle with curators. Like, so it's this system that needs to just realize what they do wrong and what they could do more to be a little bit more inclusive.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point that you bring up because I've worked in museums. I, work for a nonprofit that primarily works with kids. And there is this divide. We want to encourage, our youth to learn about, contemporary art and design, to engage with it. But then it's almost like some of these spaces are kind of like really tense for them.
Right.
Especially because people are afraid of, okay, well, what if a kid runs into this or that? Like I remember I had a exhibition. It was my first solo exhibition, and I set up, this stone sculpture in the middle of the floor, and I had it like liquid nailed to the floor so it wouldn't fall over. And the next week when I went in to visit, it had been dismantled and put in a corner. And I was livid. And when I confronted the office, they said, well, there's lots of kids that run around through here. And we were just thinking, what if a kid runs into that? They're going to get hurt. And my initial reaction was, well, children shouldn't be running through these spaces. And where are the parents? And I was so irritated. But then that space was a youth center. And it absolutely had kids, running through it, and thinking about that, like, okay, maybe they shouldn't have taken down my work, but if I would have known that ahead of time, I could have moved the positioning of my work so that it wouldn't have to be taken down and that kids could still engage with it, still see it. It's these simple communications and taking stuff like that into consideration, so that things can still be available, but also still accessible, so that it doesn't have to create a conflict. Yeah, I think this is really incredible.
It is. There's my initial reaction would be like that too. Like, don't bring your child to the gallery. It is, of course, because kids are a destructive force, but they also learn so quickly. Like, I took my son with me to every opening, and he knows what that the yellow tape stands for. Like, he would never cross the yellow tape. So galleries could educate them when they tell them, please don't do that, and they won't. They listen to others, they don't listen to their parents. But when there's an authority figure in a gallery space, hey, do not touch that, they will not touch that. But at the same time, we want a future population who understands culture, who knows critical thinking. And that only happens if we allow kids go into these art spaces and learn to critical, like what these things are, right? If we don't let them in any art institution, how do we expect them to come back and become museum members when they are 20, 21, 22, 30? Like, why kids love Target? Because they love going there with their parents. They become loyal customers to these grocery stores because they are welcoming with their shopping carts, and they don't go mad like when kids spill something. So we have to understand, when we let kids in an institutions, you are investing in your future members. So I think that's really important.
Oh yeah, and introducing them to the environment early so they feel like that's a space they can go to. Several summers ago, I taught the summer camps, or one of the summer camps for Lux, and one of the most important parts of the summer was the pairing with the summer visiting resident artist. And the kids would get to go up into the studio, and we taught them gallery etiquette, and they followed it very easily. And some of these kids were as young as 4 or 5 years old. So it's almost kind of silly to think that these spaces can't accommodate and have them included, especially because you're right, kids learn quickly,
and there will be issues, of course. One or two incidents will happen. Today we had a gallery visit, and 2 grown adults, crashed and spilled water. So things do happen, but we can't just cancel everything with the fear that the artwork will be ruined.
Yeah, no, seriously. And that's part of it. Once the art leaves your studio, there's the risk of the world.
Right, that's why we have insurances.
Exactly. Any thoughts from the group on this topic or subject before I move on to the next? If you want to share a story or anything like that, it's totally open to that. All right.
I like how hi.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I said I like it when kids are, where they're used to the culture of going to museums and being around art. And it's not something where you have to be in hushed, quiet voices, but still respectful of that you are in a space. And I think same goes as to going for concerts or, things like that, where children need to be, where it has to be ingrained into as part of culture for them. So,
yeah, I think that's a really great point that you make. It's about respect, and just as parents and other caregivers teach the young to be respectful, the same rules apply everywhere else. You learn to respect it, and you only learn to respect it by going and doing and seeing. All right, thank you so much for your comments. The next slide that I have is on your series, and please correct my pronunciation, but is it Gun or is it Gun?
Gun.
Gun. Okay. All right. So one of the questions that I had for you, because so much of your work, as you stated earlier, is collaborative. I wanted to ask, when it comes down to collaboration, how do you go about initiating some of these projects? Does the idea come first, and then you try and find others that are going to best work with the idea, or does the idea come organically just from the people you're around or the situations that you're around?
The idea comes first, but it's not a rigid idea. It's just the idea of doing something with others, I think. Like in this case, gün actually, I'm Turkish,
Yes.
and it refers to this tradition in Turkey. Gün means a day. And it's just like my mother used to do these too. It's if you are a stay-at-home mother, so you create this network with all the other stay-home mothers in your neighborhood. So they switch turns, like hosting people, but like every day or every week, one day, this group of women would come to your house. And it's this amazing community of women sitting together, like knitting, sewing, doing crafts projects, gossiping, talking about politics. It's just like therapy almost. Like they have this all day when the husbands are at work from 9 till 5. They just like eat and feast and dance, and it's this amazing time. So I was thinking about these days, like how probably when I moved to here, I felt lonely, obviously. Probably that's why I started thinking about that, because I did not have a community. Everything I loved was in Turkey. So I was just thinking about these güns, these days, these society communities. Then I started researching. Like my projects are long-term research projects. I read about them. I talk to scholars who, wrote about this tradition. That I wanted to start organizing or bring attention to these, like, because this is a tradition that's sort of not respected in Turkey. Like, it's like, oh, those women, they don't work. They're just like killing time. They don't, like, Turkish women don't value these days. But in my opinion, they're like this amazing affinity group that it also has this microeconomy that's like mind-blowingly beautiful. So I just wanted to like do a project that I could recreate this with a group of creatives, with the idea of, analyzing Turkish women's participation in the society, women's role in the society. So it was the initial idea. Like I just wanted to create a gün for people with women. Some I knew, some I didn't. So I started like sending emails, invitations for people like, hey, I have this book idea, which was first an initial real gathering. So we met in Istanbul. So I organized these women. I rented a hotel room. We just spent 2 days, Saturday, Sunday, just chit-chatting about like what we could do together. And it was an open invitation. I said, like, whoever is interested in this idea, just come. Let's just dig deeper. Let's research deeper. And then whatever comes out of that, we put it in the book.
Yeah. I think that's really interesting how like that the gün, I think is like, do you think it's generational, or do like younger Turkish women also participate in it?
I don't know, because I think more and more people work now. So you don't really have time to stay home and celebrate with other women, be with other women. They may be still doing it. I'm not sure, but it's a dying tradition that I know. Like I remember myself as a child going these days with my mother. I would be so bored because there's nothing to do.
You're talking. Yeah.
But now I'm like, I understand now why she went, because it was such a good support group for her. Yeah,
I think that that sounds so nice. And I would I'm thinking about oh my God, I would give anything for that. Just like a group, especially like a group of individuals I can relate to, where we just get together.
Right.
Just to talk.
But the whole book is really about
as you want.
How can we self-organize? Like the whole book is not only talks about the tradition, but it teaches or offers ideas to people, like how can you create your own community support group, because this is the system, the power structures established don't want us to get together, right? They want us to be focused and work 24/7, be exhausted when we come home and sit in front of the TV and keep consuming commercials, right? So it's very individualized, it's very lonely. So the book offers like ideas, like how can you start your own support group, and how can you reach out to other people and let them know that you need this as much as they do. And I think creative communities, it's a lot of organizations now do that, maybe do a workshop where people sit around a table and like do things together. I think the to-do mending project was an amazing example of that.
Yeah, great.
So more and more people are aware of the power of the collective, right? So it's really important. And we can't always wait for other people to reach out to us. So it's like, hey, one of my favorite artists, his name is Tom Marione. He's a San Francisco-based conceptual artist from the 60s, 70s. So he did this project called Drinking Beer with Artists is the Best Form of Art Making, something like that, like drinking beer with artists. So what he did was he opened his house and invited people to come over for beer. He had a fridge full of beer. That's all he had. So the whole idea was to sit together and drink beer in his basement every Wednesday. So there's definitely something about like this too, right? Like being able to, I wish we were in place and have a little bit more intimate conversation. But yeah, sitting together, being together, talking, sharing, letting yourself be vulnerable, asking for advice, coming up with ideas, smashing the stage is so important.
It is. I really think that this idea and this tradition is incredibly valuable. Like it reminds me about what my mom would tell me about my grandmother's like bridge club. Like on my mom's side of the family, they're from Wisconsin, and my grandmother was a stay-at-home mom, and she would have bridge club. And it sounds very similar to this, except they would the women in the neighborhood would get together to play bridge, the card game. But it was always so much more than that, and it was that opportunity to organize. It also reminds me of the Women's Sewing Circle and Terrorist Organization,
right?
Which has a very similar idea of just women organizing together was threatening to men in the patriarchy, but they're like, oh, but it's a sewing circle. We're doing something domestic and in the home, so it's less threatening. But you think about how domestic meetings and acts aren't given the same amount of importance as going to a like a conference or something like that. But these domestic spaces harbor, I think what you're right, is the most intimate connections, genuine conversations, which are so necessary and needed. As you said, especially right now, we've all been isolated. I mean, how many like Zoom calls or sceners or video calls have you jumped on in the last year just to not feel like you're in this bubble, right? This idea of simply like, let's have a community to build around you is really essential. That's definitely something that I want to take note of, because community building is very important to me, because I'm a queer Muslim, so it's hard for me to find other people like myself, and community building has been a very important part of sustaining, maintaining, feeling seen and validated, and it comes from something as simple as just coming together and talking. I think sometimes not even having like a specific reason to meet is sometimes the best, because then you have everything to go from. Is this project still ongoing, or is this book sort of in its like final stage?
Oh, it is final. Yeah, it's been a while. We haven't organized, but Home Affairs definitely benefited a lot from these organizations, because we did organize a few mother circles just to, hear from other mothers and create things that would respond to those conversations. But yeah, I don't really do much anymore about this. Yeah.
Gotcha. Anyone in the group want to share thoughts, opinions, have a question? I'll show the bar here. Looks like I have some.
Tom, I'm gonna answer in chat too, but Tom Marione. Somebody in the Kian is asking the name of the artist I mentioned. It's really good, and he has this book came out of San Francisco MoMA as a homage to his work. That it is really called "Drinking beer with friends is the best form of art making," something like that. But if you Google his name, you'll see this long-term project and the book that got published about the project. It's beautiful.
Yeah, that sounds great. I'm gonna check that out. I feel like some of my best ideas for art came from sitting around with a group of friends, and back in the day when I used to smoke, sharing a cigarette with a group of friends and people just saying things freely, and then sitting over a bottle of wine after going to a show and just sort of pinging all these different ideas. I think it's nice to let the mind wander and to see like the different vines of other people, how they can creep into your own mind. There's so much benefit in just gathering, which is incredible.
And I think that's the artwork itself. Like that's what I argue in this book too. Like just a gathering itself. It's not what comes out of the gathering or the meeting, but that meeting itself is, or also Tom Marione argues, that is the art form. Like that collective sharing the same things at that like 1 hour, 2 hour, 4 hour, whatever the duration of that meeting, it is the work itself.
Mm-hmm. With this and the other work that we looked at, okay, thank you so much. There is a chat here. There's sort of this ephemeral aspect of it. Like you have the book, and that's the sort of guide, it's the instruction, but then the artwork has also this ephemeral aspect to it. How do you document or try to like capture that feeling if you can at all, or do you just kind of let it be and then let that exist in its own sort of separate space?
It does exist in its own space. Like it is, Ellen Copro, happening happens and it's it. Documenting does not really justify what happened at that moment. So we take pictures and obviously we all want to document and archive everything, but it's just for archival purposes. It's not really, the book is completely something else. You can't understand what happened at that meeting. The two separate things. The meeting was its own thing. Mm-hmm. It was happened, and only the people who participated will understand, will remember, can talk about it.
And that's really special because it we're talking about it, and myself, I'm imagining like, wow, what that must have been like. Of course, I can never experience that.
But at the same time, you can, because I'm sure you have one memory of an inspirational gathering with other people, right? Mm-hmm. So again, like we can't explain what the heck contemporary art is, but we all have our own understanding or feelings about what it was for us. Yeah. So it's the same thing. Like these gatherings, I'm sure everybody had this really intimate, powerful meeting that when you left, you felt really empowered and you're ready to take over the world.
Yeah.
So it was just that meeting.
Yeah. But then you also have this really wonderful guide that can then help inspire people if they don't know how to start, because I think community building is something that's difficult. It doesn't seem like it should be difficult because you just find a bunch of people who you vibe with and you just do the things you want to do. But then like when it actually comes down to that, especially I think being an adult, it's really hard.
Right.
Unless it's tied to a very specific like idea, like a job or a profession or something. So then if you're not tied to that, how do you then create that community? I think like this is a really good like employ of design, because it's like, hey, you know, you can do it. And using that sort of emotional connection of like, when was the last time you really felt like you were part of something? I think that like is very moving.
Thanks. Yeah. Again, we don't like, I don't know. Like I work so hard to even like spend time with my friends anymore, you know, and that system sadly sucks you into, you got to be working and producing 24/7, that you can't really talk to other people, you know, and organize against this. It is a very difficult setup, that the hamster wheel, you know, it's so hard to get out of that.
I think that community building is a lovely form of resistance. I wanted to go back to home affairs because I thought that this was both very smart and also very funny. I think it goes back to the idea of how do we engage our young people into art and into art spaces and institutions. And I just thought this was so clever. Can you tell me a little bit about this?
Sure, happy to. This is a newly concluded project, so I'm really happy and proud of it, personally. So after the poster series, we started receiving a lot of emails from galleries and organizations like, you know, we hear you're telling us like that we need to change things, like give us a solid list of what can we do to accommodate parents and caregivers and mother artists, you know, tell us what to do. And we had a list, we gathered a list, like, you know, maybe switch your opening hours, maybe organize a little kids section, you know, all these things that we can think about. But then we sat down one day. I was in Ohio for a project visiting my colleague. We were at this really busy coffee shop, and we were, you know, all of a sudden, like I stopped and looked around. There were parents with kids. No, none of them were throwing tantrums or unhappy being there, because they were all on a high chair, elevated, and be on the same level with their parents, right? I just looked around and like, none of these kids are unhappy being here. And my kid was maybe 4 or 5 back then. And I have a whole series of like him being unhappy in gallery spaces and museum visits. Like he is like on the floor, crying, climbing on things. I'm like, maybe we can get a clue from this situation. Like, why are they happy? Because they are elevated, right? They are on the same face to face with their parents. They're eating on the table. They're sharing, like they're treated as a human being. It's not just neglected as the short little puppy on the floor, right? So that whole, and we also tell that when you go to a grocery store, there are shopping carts where kids sit in. They can also reach out. They're also like grown-ups. They treat them as grown-up. They could reach out to things and pick up things and put it in the basket. Like they're not bored, they're included. So we said, like, why don't art spaces, art institutions use this? So we designed this furniture. We have a patent and everything, and we are launching this in October in Toledo Museum in Ohio. We are so excited. So it's basically an assistive device for little kids from age 2 when they start walking and, you know, running around till 4 for maybe 5. So they sit over, it's on wheels, so you can it's really comfortably moving, so you can walk around with your child on the art level is really important, because when they can't see the art, they don't want to be there. And we know that all art is usually hung around 57, 50 inches. Like the kids are small, they always have a distorted view. If they're in a stroller, people cut off, they don't consider them as an audience. So we just came out with this furniture so that kids could just utilize, and the parents can utilize, and the art institutions can utilize. So we're very excited about it.
Yeah, no, that's really amazing, because I think it goes back to this idea of like, who are these institutions for? And when we are trying to be more inclusive, I like that you're solving this, I think, in like a very in a very simple way. Just elevate, right?
Right. Right.
Just elevation. Again, like, all of your work just blows my mind by how
Thank you.
like it just confronts these like things that I'm just like, okay, yep, that's how it is in the art world, and I need to move around it. I don't think about so much about how do I get the institution to accommodate me, and accommodate people that I want to engage. Because, like, I mean, I'm not a kid physically anymore. But if I was, like, I wanted to see things. I remember asking my parents, pick me up. And it's such a simple solution. Put them at the level of the art. If you're not going to bring the art level to them, make it so that they can engage with it at the same level. And that's why kids love the zoo more than they love art museums, is because the areas to view the animals are from like floor to ceiling, and they can still see the tiger, on the ground, but you can't see the Rembrandt the same way, That's so smart. That's just so amazing.
Thank you. Like the goal is really, hopefully in the next 5 years, like when we go to a restaurant, we never think, oh, they're not going to have a high chair, right? Every restaurant owns a version of a high chair to accommodate parents, because they want you there, they want your money, right? So hopefully every art institution will have one of these. It doesn't have to be this one. Like, I'm happy to share just the idea, right? The concept. They should just have a few in their spaces, so that when I go there with my diaper bag and my child, I feel included. I don't feel the hostility, because it comes to that at some point. When you have a child you're carrying, guards look at you weird. Other visitors look at you weird. You just feel unwanted. But if you have a structure like this, a furniture like this in your space, as an institution, you're saying, hey, it's okay to be here with your child. We welcome you. We want you. And it's an investment as a future member.
And how easy, like it's so easily acceptable too, because someone's like, oh, well, we can't have kids in here because they cause a problem. It's like, okay, put them in a rolly chair, and everyone's like, oh, okay, yeah, okay, problem solved. Like, and also the part that it's elevated, because when I worked at a museum, we didn't allow strollers,
right?
Because they were really big and all these other things. But then even if we did allow strollers, it still has the kid very low.
Strollers help with the kids running around problem, definitely, but it doesn't change kids' relationship with the art viewing.
Yeah, this is such a smart solution to that. It's like, just put them up higher and let them be upright, and let them feel like they can engage with this world that is not made for them to engage with, but then is also encouraged for them to be engaged with.
But it's fun. They're riding a horse. They love it.
Yeah.
My daughter loves it.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of want to sit in one. I would love to go to the art museum, like the Brooklyn Museum, and just sit and have someone wheel me around so that I can look at the art, but also be riding on a horse, because that sounds really dope.
Right. Our research, we researched so many furnitures, obviously, for children and for grown-ups too. And it came to rocking horses and carousels that kids love and grown-ups love too. So that's why we combined the high chair with a horse, because it seems like it's a popular animal.
Yeah, and you have the bars there, so they have something to hold on to.
The hands are busy. Yeah, they can't reach.
Yeah. No, that's so great. Any comments on Art Sit before I move on to the next slide?
Daniel said, amazing idea. Thank you.
Or did someone say something? Okay. So moving on to the next slide. So when I saw this, I really wanted to talk about it because I'm a really big history nerd. And recently I finished a series that researched heavily into medieval Islamic Empire art, miniature paintings and literature. And I'm also very interested in the intersections, the contributions and the globalization, that very early globalization that was produced on what we know as the Silk Road. And your approach to talking about the Silk Road, I feel like, is incredibly unique, because I know there's lots of artists that make work about the Silk Road, different aspects of it, especially when we're connecting it to money, goods, sustainability, imperialism. Yours has this very, I think it just comes back to this emotional feeling to it. Do you want to talk a bit about this?
Sure. This is a project that's just happening or maybe finalizing as we are speaking right now. Wow. It's gonna be premiered in. It's a 4-channel video, immersive video installation. That's gonna we're gonna show it in China, in OCAD Museum in Xi'an, in end of November. So I work with a friend, a colleague of mine, Millie Chen, who is from China, and I'm from Turkey. So how we sort of jokingly started on this project, again, we were having a glass of wine together, and we started joking about, like, wouldn't it be funny if I started walking from Istanbul and you started walking from China, and we like met in the middle? Of course, it's an impossible mission with all the crazy deserts and mountains and, unwelcoming terrain. But then we were like, oh, let's do that. We started in 4 years ago. And the whole idea is to travel to these places on the Silk Road and meet people, meet artists and musicians, and ask them to write original music and make original music. And we went to Istanbul, we went to Iran together, China, Tashkent. I couldn't go.
Yeah.
Because visa issues and stuff, and right now we can't travel at all. So we had to finish project completely virtually. So that's kind of a bummer, because we wanted to be there when these things were happening. That there's a lot of FaceTiming and Zoom talks and whatnot. But again, that's a different kind of thing, because you can have an extended conversation, and and it also allowed us to give those people a little bit more autonomy, because we can't be there with them. So you're like, okay, just do something and like convince us that it's the right decision. And it is. So basically what's happening in these 4 screens that you are seeing, the left is Istanbul, Iran, Tashkent, and Uzbekistan, and Iran, China. There are local musicians, so they play their music. It's just like a still landscape, 20 minutes each video. They each like play their music, and then they listen to the music playing on the next video, and then those 2 are listening to the third one, and then those 3 are listening. So they're each like pretending, obviously, to hear each other's music and each other's sounds, and it's just on a loop. So we just wanted to like create one landscape, because it is one, like there's so many similarities and traditions that just like moved on because of the Silk Road, they all have a form of dumpling, which is really interesting, that everybody thinks, oh, it's only for Turkey. But when I went to Iran, I'm like, oh, you have the same thing. So we are all the same people basically on that route. And it's just a way of reconnecting with our roots and
Yeah. There's so much I could talk about with this, especially when it comes to like history, and then how nations formed,
Right.
and how trade routes like this were deeply affected, but then also not. And I mean, that's a whole nother conversation. um, uh, what really fascinates me about this is that I think the approach you're taking to it is that you're right. It's one big landscape, and the way that this is sort of presented is it's like a continuation of each panel. But then the tying it to music, and I think music is a really is really like fascinating because of I think it makes me think about the passage of time, how stories are told, because music is the vessel for oral history, and how different things have been shared. Like, for example, I'm researching Arabian Nights, and so many of the stories are as far east as China, and then some of them are further south into India, and it's inspired by the trading of stories as much as the trading of goods. And you think about how music is this very emotional thing, and a landscape can be incredibly emotional. What made you want to tie the two together?
It's the initial the when we started the project, it was more like collecting protest songs. So we were interested in protest songs from each country. But then it became a little bit of a difficult topic because like China and Iran, there's definitely censorship, and you can't even email protest. You know, you can't put it in an email, it gets censored. Like there's so much control and surveillance that people were getting in trouble just talking to us. So we quickly started thinking like what else we could do to hear emotions or complaints from these people. So the songs don't have lyrics, they're just hummings, but from the tone you hear a certain emotion. So it's really powerful when you actually see the video with the musician. Like you don't have to understand you know any music, like the music really has its own emotion. So it's just like tying that emotion coming from these people with the geographical location. So yeah, we just wanted to hear their voices, hear something from these people, because they're all going through very very difficult times right now. But also like how can we deal with censorship, because it is huge in all of these countries.
I think that's a really clever solution to that, is having people hum, because I think like music is unique in that way where it's very steeped in emotion, and it's a language I think that anyone can connect to. If you are receptive to that feeling, you can connect with it. And it's really important, especially when there's language barriers, or barriers in general, because how do you prevent people from hearing music if it's being spoken out loud or played out loud? Right. I like to imagine that they can, as you said, they're pretending to hear each other and then respond to it, and yet they're filmed thousands of miles away from each other, hundreds of miles away. But the idea of that, and that like, can you really stop someone from hearing something if it's loud enough, or if it's felt, given enough feeling?
Right, like right now for the museum, we had to send everything to the censorship department in China, the government organization. So they're analyzing everything frame by frame, just to see if there's going to be any sensitive material. So, but they won't be able to report the tone of a sound. Like that's the only way to bypass that. Like if there's a word, they may say, oh, this is problematic. But if it's just a sound, nobody can say this is kind of not right.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's just
there's
the
not a
same.
legitimate reason to get rid of it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's
But it could actually express so much to the right ear.
yeah, it leaves room for interpretation, especially because there is that sort of abstracted aspect of it, with it being something as simple as humming.
Right.
That's amazing. So when will this be on view?
In December or late November, it's in China. Then it's going to go to Toronto. We haven't planned anything else after that. So hopefully we'll travel.
Well, I hope that it comes to Southern California so I can see it. This seems
It's a
really,
possibility for sure. Yeah.
I hope so. This is awesome. Any comments on this before I move on? All right. So I have time for one more work. And I really wanted to take a look at, I think what was one of your earliest works that you
This is a very early work. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to close out of the slideshow.
Did I send you the video too?
Yes. You did.
Oh, okay.
I thought that this was the first thing I looked at, and I thought it was really moving. I think it sort of set the tone for what I was going to expect throughout the rest of your work, which I think this one has a lot more of a visceral aspect to it, but the feeling is still in all of the other works that you mentioned. So, okay, I have the video pulled up. Share the screen again.
I'm actually glad that you saved this for last.
Yeah, I felt like wanted to get that last sort of, bring it back, circle it back, cyclical, as they say. Okay. All right. Can everybody see the screen?
Yes.
All right. I'm gonna reload the page. It might have just frozen a bit.
It's actually 2003, not, did you say 13 maybe on the slide?
Oh, I might have.
It's 3 because that's the year that I came to the United States as a graduate student.
Thank you for thank you for the correction. Pull this up. Okay, now I'm ready to show you. Okay, so please ignore my slide. This was done in 2003, not 2013.
I guess 2004, not 3.
All right. So it's very striking. And it definitely projects off of the screen. Do you want to share a bit about that? Or should we open it up to a cold read?
Let's open it up.
All right. So we're going to open it up to you in the audience and do a cold read. A cold read is when you try and decipher or, sort of like state what you get or interpret from a work of art without knowing what it's about. So at any time, please feel free to chime in and share what you think. There's no wrong answers, so don't feel intimidated.
Hi. Oh.
Please go right ahead.
It kind of was like also in a way branding or labeling to me.
A rebranding or labeling.
Mm-hmm.
And why would you say branding or labeling in that way?
I think it was just like the definitions, the adjectives were already formed before they were put on her. And to me, there was also like the pain involved of I don't know if the pins were really put into the skin, but that was a little harsh to me. I mean, not painful.
Yeah, that's definitely like a very striking thing to see. And then there's sort of this aspect where you can imagine it, you can feel it going through. Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for sharing. There are a couple in the chat. Daniel Gonzalez says she still had signs of those words once they were removed. So it's like the word stuck on her back. And then Marissa Cooper says the labels are given in the way that leaves a mark on us. So I think that there's sort of this consistency between all three of you in that there's this idea of the body that they're being pinned on is being assigned those things. And because it's on the back, it's not something that they get agency or control over. And the pinning, the piercing through is this very visceral or bodily reaction that we have, that sort of like, ouch aspect of it. Any other thoughts before I turn it over to Arzu? How about this one? How did that make you feel watching that video piece?
Well, it's a sad piece, so I don't think anybody will leave today with a happy note.
Jamie says it was interesting to see how the labels were read as they were put on versus how they were removed, and the words were left to look at on their own versus within the group. I see. So seeing each word being assigned had sort of like a different effect than seeing them together. Is that what you mean, Jamie?
Yeah, and also just like the order, like starting with human and ending with silent. Like I was staring at those words the longest and they were kind of like the bookends, but all the words in between also gave those other words meaning, but we didn't have them up as long. So that was just where my mind went.
Thank you. That's a great insight. Yeah. I think it's definitely like a sad work, and as a woman, like I can relate to that in having value being assigned to me, or having different descriptors being assigned to me, and how those can actually be harmful, especially when I don't have the choice to do it. That's what I get out of it. And how even after they're removed, the sign of it being there is still there. So even after you sort of get past being defined by society and starting to define yourself, there's still traces of that. It's hard to get rid of that. There is a new chat. Okay, this is from, is it Crit Stewart? They said, I made it about Arzu and wondered if it reflected Arzu's experience on just arriving in America. Okay, so Crit, is that a piece that you made in collaboration?
I think he meant his reading, his understanding.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Yeah. Well, Arzu, thoughts on that?
Well, all these things are so true, and it is true, Crit. It's definitely a piece that I made the year after I arrived as a immigrant woman, young woman, very insecure about my language skills. So I did not speak much. So I was quiet but pretty, and trying to survive as a immigrant woman. And it was not a very pleasant environment, like feeling lonely, missing your home. But I also had goals and dreams. I came here for school. So it is very, because obviously when you first in a situation, you victimize yourself, right? I'm like, oh, I'm so unhappy and I'm so lonely and I miss home. And I made a series of these videos talking about like really depressive emotions. But I have to say, it really helped me find this other way of working, as you can all see in these other projects. Like I like to surround myself with people now, because I really hated how I felt when I first came. The first couple of years of me being here as a stranger or alien or a new person was so hard and harsh. So I think it's, or maybe the book even is a reason like why I want people to go out and create their own communities and empower themselves with other people who think alike and feel alike and help each other and support each other, because life is really hard.
Yeah.
And we need to support each other and help each other. And, when one of us succeed, all of us succeed. So all this like fake competitiveness and, competing with each other, it's just so sad to me now. And yeah, I just want to reach out and help everybody around me. And I hope that, not even help, help is the wrong word, but support and be together and feel together and just enjoy all this life that we are given and have together, instead of being alone and just running for this goal. It's just, it doesn't make sense to me anymore.
No, that's really wonderful. And like, would you say that that's what inspired you to become an artist, wanting to create connections and community?
No, but being an artist, I realized that I don't like being alone in my studio and feeling all these depressive feelings. I just want to be out there with the community and feel festive and dance and be loud and annoy other people. I'm tired of trying to please other people. I just want to cause disruption.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I think all the works that I've seen so far just have a very emotional aspect to it, very personal. There's a lot of presence in all of your work, and getting to talk to you about that tonight has been really wonderful. And inspiring. I think anyone who's actively trying to build a community and seeing someone do it, I think is really inspiring. So personally for me, thank you. That was really wonderful to see how you did that. I have one more question for you. And it's, if you weren't going to be an artist or a designer or anything in that type of world, what would be your fantasy like job?
If I could be any, say it again.
Yeah, if you could be anything in the world, no limitations, other than being an artist or designer or educator, what would you be?
Mother.
A mother?
I don't know. There's no one answer to it. I want to be a superhero. I want to be the best artist. I want to be the best educator. You know, I love teaching. I love students. I love the interaction with my students. I would also love to be a social worker. I would love to collect garbage. You know, it's such an important job. So I don't know. There's so many things that I want to be every day, and it changes every hour, I think. What would you like to be?
Probably like work at a horse barn and just be around horses all day.
That sounds really lovely. I would want to do that too now.
You're into the range. That's my like fantasy. Like whenever life is really stressful, that's my happy place. But then I'm also a really big Doctor Who fan, and I wanted to be like the Doctor as well, and like kind of do everything and be good at everything. But that's a reality that I'm like, okay, well, that's why it's fictional, but I can be a horse girl in a different world, and that's enough for me.
I love that.
Well, it has been such a joy having you on, getting to know more about your work, an inspiring evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening and being here. Hopefully we'll keep in touch and
absolutely
see each other sometime.
Oh yeah, I definitely love to have some tea. Cool. I wanted to include the undecided piece, watching you pour all of that tea, and I was like, oh yeah, that's so good.
That is me. I can't decide what I want to be, what I want to say.
Yeah, that gives you more insight. That definitely gives you more insight into that work. Thank you all for coming tonight and participating in this collaboration with Design Week and hearing the wonderful and talented Arzu Ozkal tonight. Please, check out more of what Design Week has to offer and keep tabs on it in the future. And also stay in touch with ICA. We're going to have some great exhibitions happening and starting in, and I need to make sure I get this right, the date right. Starting very soon, we are going to have we're going to have an exhibition with the Mexican conceptualist Gabriel Rico. This is going to be his first solo exhibition in Southern California. So if you're looking to see some live art in person, that would be a great place. That's starting in September. So check that out. Stay in touch with us. What the Heck is Contemporary Art is going to have another class in October and November. You can check that out on Lux Art Institute's website. And in the future, it will be ICA San Diego. But come back, see me again. Arzu, you're welcome to come back anytime just to hang out.
I will.
And once again, thank you all so much for being here. Have a wonderful night. Thank you.
Thank you, Yasmine. This was really fun. Thank you.
I hope you have a lovely rest of your evening. Good night, everyone. Take care.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.